Hello there! In this video we will be building a simple headless commerce application with Nuxt Free, Shopify and TailwindCSS. I hope you're as excited as I am. Let's take a quick look at the demo. Our final application will look like this. At the top we will have the header with the Nuxt logo. Next we will have this huge banner with a text "Find the best products on the market." Next, we will have this carousel of products that were fetched from the Shopify GraphQL API. And at the bottom, we will see this image made with Nuxt.js and with the name of the author. When we click on a certain product card, we will be redirected to that product page, where we will see the product image, the product title, the product description, and the product price with the button. When we click on this button, we will be redirected to Shopify external checkout. What you see here is an error, but this error is actually caused by the fact that the store I connected to this Nuxt application is not taking orders right now. In your application, you will be successfully redirected to Shopify external checkout. Keep in mind that this is not a real e-commerce website. If you are looking for a production-ready Nuxt application with Shopify, I would highly recommend you to try out Vue Storefront. Links in the description. This is Shopify admin panel. In the bottom here, you see that I am currently on a free trial. I have added some dummy products to our store, and each of them have title, description, some images, and the pricing as well. In the apps section and the develop apps section, we will see our Nuxt Shopify Tailwind. This is the custom app that will be used to connect to our Nuxt application as a storefront. To connect to Shopify GraphQL API, we will be using the GraphQL Client module for Nuxt Free, created by TheHeader. To style our e-commerce application, we will be using Tailwind module for Nuxt Free. I have generated a plain Nuxt Free project by using Nuxt CLI. Now install the Tailwind CSS module. In order to use it, we have to register it in our Nuxt config as a module. And we can do it like this. Let's start build our components. In public folder, I added a logo.svg file, which is basically a Nuxt logo. We will create first our TheHeader component, and to do that we can use the new Nuxt CLI. So npx nuxt add component TheHeader. What this does is it will automatically generate a new component for us called TheHeader with script tags, template, and the style as well. For this component, we won't be using any styles, as we are using Tailwind CSS. We won't be using any logic as well, because this will be a simple header component with just a logo. So we can also get rid of this div element. We will start by creating a nav tag, and we'll declare a class of py to give it a vertical padding of 2. We'll give it a position relative and a width full. Inside, we'll create a div element and we'll give it a class of padding horizontal, which is x6. Inside of it, we'll add a Nuxt link component that will redirect us to the home page. And inside of it, we'll also register a image tag with a class of width 20, height 20. We'll add a src, which will be /logo.svg, which is actually this file right here. And we'll also give it an alt, which will be store logo, and we'll close this. To create the footer component, we'll go with the very similar approach. To create a layout, we will create a new folder called Layouts, and inside of it we'll create a new file called custom.vue. This layout will contain both the footer and the header, as well as the slot for the content that will be displayed in the middle. So we'll create a template tag, and inside of it there will be a div with a class of px20 for horizontal padding, and inside we'll have the header, the slot, and the footer. To create a page, we'll create a new folder here called pages, and we'll create a new file called index.vue. Inside this file, we will create a simple template just for now with a div home page. In order to view it, we have to modify the app component so that it will contain the Nuxt layout with the name of our custom layout, custom, and inside of it we'll add a Nuxt page component. Let's try it out, yarn dev, and see it in the browser. As you can see, we have the header with the Nuxt logo. We have the slot for the homepage, which is actually the div with the homepage, and we have the image made with Nuxt.js and the link to my Twitter handle. To fetch the data from Shopify GraphQL API, we'll be using the Nuxt GraphQL Client. To add it to our project, we'll go with yarn add Nuxt GraphQL Client, and we will register it in our modules array, Nuxt GraphQL Client. To configure our Nuxt GraphQL Client module, we will modify the runtime config and the public property, which will be called GraphQL Client. And inside of it we'll have the clients, and we will modify the default one. We'll give it a host, which in our case will be process.env.shopify domain. We'll give it a token with a name of Shopify Storefront Access Token. We'll give it a value of process.env.shopify storefront token, and we'll give it a type of null because it is a not default header that the Nuxt GraphQL client is expecting you to pass. In order to make this module work also on the client side, we need to retain token and set it to true. Okay, let's add some environment variables .env, and we'll have the Shopify domain, which in my case is nuxt-tailwind.myshopify.com/API//GraphQL.json, and the Shopify Storefront token. In order to fetch the data from the Shopify GraphQL API, we will create a new folder called queries, and inside of it we'll create a new file called products.gql. In this file we'll create a query called products, and it will have two parameters. First, which will be an integer that will be required, and the second one will be a query, which will be a type of string. Inside of it we will have a products query that will accept the first parameter, which will be the first passed as a variable, and the query, which will be the same as a variable query. To test if our GraphQL query works as expected, we can go to Pages and index.vue, and inside here we'll open a script tag, and it will be a script setup with the lang ts. In here we will destructure the data from the use async data, and we will name it a products, and it will be a method that will invoke GQL products, and it will take the first 3 products. For now, let's just print the data in our template and to see if it works. Yarn dev. As we can see, we have the data from the Shopify GraphQL API that we can then use to power up our Vue components. Let's create the hero banner component. Let's add this hero banner to our homepage. Inside of here, we will take this data and we'll put it, let's say, here. And in here, we will just import hero banner. Let's start the server and see if it works. As we can see, the home banner is a part of our homepage right now. To create a product card component, we'll be using the npx nuxt add component product card. In this case, we'll be using the script tag, but we won't be using the style, so I can safely remove it. This product card component will be a component that will be just getting the data as a props and display them in a nice form. So to do that, we'll create a props variable, and it will equal to define props. In our template section, we'll use this div and we'll give it a class of mx2, and inside of it we'll open up another div with a class of position relative, rounded LG, and shadow LG. In here we will have a next link with a path to the link that we'll get as a prop. And in here we will have an image with the src of the image that we'll get as a prop. Next, we will create another div here with a class of padding 6. And inside of here, we will create a h5 with a class of font bold, text LG, and margin bottom 3. And inside of here, we will just add a title. In here, as pre, we'll add a text gray 500 and margin bottom 4. And here we will just output the price that we get from the prop. And finally, p with just the description of the product. We will define a prop, const props equals define props. In the template, we will have the div with a class of flex and margin vertical 20. And inside here, we will be just outputting the product card. You can safely remove the styles. To display the product list in our index.vue page, what we will do is we will, instead of this p tag, we will call the product list, and as a products, we'll pass a data.products.edges. And let's see if it works. As we can see, we have our product list below. To fetch the data about a certain product, we will create a new query called product.gql. We'll have a query called product, and in here we'll have a handle, which will be a type of string and required. As a query, we'll call a product by handle, and we'll pass it a handle from our variable handle. To create our product detail page, we'll create a new folder here called products, and inside of it we'll create a handle.vue. And this handle will be a param from the URL that we'll be using to fetch the data from the Shopify GraphQL API. In our product detail page, we will create a script tag, which will be a setup and lang ts. We'll get the root from current use root, and we will fetch the data and destructure it from the await use async data. And this time we will create a dynamic name for this, so it will be product dash root.params.handle. And next we will invoke a method which we'll call GQL product, and it will have a handle of root.params.handle. And in here you will have to add the as string, because params from use root are usually a string or a string array, while our GraphQL query requires a single string. Up next, we will also create another call to the GraphQL API, but this case we'll rename the data to related, and this data to the product itself. So we'll call await use async data, and in this case we'll call it very similarly, so product related, and in this case will be similar, so root.params.handle, and it will also invoke a method GQL products, but in this case we will also fetch the first free, but we will also give it a query. So this query allows us to fetch the products that match certain query criteria. In this case, what we will do is it will be also doing the string interpolation. So we'll go product type, and in our case we want to fetch the first products that are similar to our products. So product.value.product by handle and product type. We will use both of this data later, but for now let's create a product detail component. We will have a props, so const props equals define props In here, we will also define emits, because later we will add the redirect to our button to the Shopify external checkout. So const emit equals define emits, and it will be an array of strings, and in this case will be button clicked. In the template section, what we'll do is we'll create a new section, and inside of it we'll create a div, and this div will have a class of grid calls to flex, items center, and px20. Inside we will have an image with the src of the image we get from the props, and the alt will for now give it a product image. And the class will be the rounded LG, shadow LG, and the minus rotate 6, because we want the image to be rotated to the left. Next, we will have the div, and inside this div, it will have a class for sure of rounded LG, shadow LG, P20, back, drop, blur to XL. Inside we'll have the H2 with the class of text for XL and font bold, as well as the margin bottom of 6. And inside we'll have our product title. In here we have also a paragraph tag with class text gray 500 and the margin bottom 6 as well. And we'll have here the description. Below we'll have the button that at click will emit an event that button was actually clicked. And this button will have a class of px7, bg green 600, text white, font medium, text SM, rounded, shadow MD. On hover, we want the background to be green, but 700. Also on hover, what we want is the shadow to be LG. On focus, we want the BG, so background, to be green 700 as well. On focus, we want the shadow LG as well. And also on focus, the outline none. And on focus, ring 0. For active, we want the shadow LG and the transition with duration of 150 and is in out. And this button will say basically, if loading, say redirecting, else pay with the string interpolation the price. Now let's use this product detail in our product page. In here we will have the template section, and this template section will contain of a div, and here we will have the product detail. And we have the product list that we already created, and we will pass it a products of related.products.detail. edges. For now, let's give this a loading of false. And let's see if it works. Yarn dev. So we have our homepage, and when we click on a certain product here, we are redirected to the product page. To handle the redirect to the Shopify external checkout, we'll create a mutation in our queries folder called checkout.gql. And this mutation will be responsible for fetching the web URL. So we'll go mutation checkout, and it will have a variable of variant ID, which will be the ID, and it will be required. So the mutation we will call from the Shopify GraphQL API will be checkout create, and as an input to this mutation, we will pass the line items with a variant ID, which will be a variant ID from the variable, and as a quantity we'll pass 1. And as a return value we will get the checkout and the web URL. And the final step here will be to go to our product page and in here create a new ref variable called loading, and will be ref of false, and a new method called redirect to payment, which will be an async method that will set a loading value to true, and then what we will do is we will call the GQL checkout mutation that we previously created, and as a variant ID we will pass a product value, product by handle, variants, and edges, the first item, node, and ID. And what we'll get from it is the checkout create, and inside of it the checkout, and in here we'll just get the web URL. And finally we will go window.location.href equals web URL, so that we are basically redirecting the user to the URL provided by Shopify. This loading will be loading, and at button clicked event we will call the redirect to payment. Let's run the server and see if it works. We have our page, and let's see what happens when we click the pay button. As you can see, we are redirected to the Shopify external checkout.